We recently bought a minivan and bought a house. It was our second time buying a house, no less. So you can only imagine how adult I feel at this point in my life. More adult than I thought I might ever be. And here I am with two kids, buying a minivan and buying my second home. As many of you know, we just moved our family from Denver to Kansas City. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about the financial mindset that led to us making that decision to live in a more affordable area, as well as the actual practical running of the numbers. What are some framework and guidance that we used and that we have found, and that, different approaches from the most conservative to the most aggressive forms of investing and budgeting that will allow you to have some financial peace and financial security. That's what we want to talk about here today. This episode is going to be all about buying with wisdom and prudence rather than just buying and spending your money with emotion and frivolously that leads to a lot of stress and anxiety when those bills start to stack up, when you have student loans and all these other costs, and just the rising cost of living, the rise in expenses. It's incredibly difficult to live right now. And especially if you have children on top of that. And if you add on top of that, you're trying to do it on one income earner, it is super, super challenging. And so it's even more important when times are difficult, when you're playing on hard, that you make wise, practical, and prudent decisions. So that's what we're going to be getting into today. And if you like this video, please like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel so that way you don't miss any of our future content. Without further ado, let's get into today's episode of Seeking Excellence. All right, so I want to help you find that middle ground between fear-based frugality and just reckless consumerism. The world is just constantly comparing you via social media. In your own life, maybe you have friends or family members who are doing better than you, or just further down the line than you, or in a different circumstance than you. And you're always comparing yourself to what other people might have or what they can afford. What's difficult when it comes to financial decisions is we never get to really know the full story, the full picture of somebody else's situation. It's really challenging because you're only getting a glimpse into what they actually have. Some people may be getting financial help from their parents that you're not receiving. Some may have gotten benefits, like I've gotten different benefits from being in the military. So I'm able to buy a house, for example, with the VA home loan, which allows you to put 0% down and not pay mortgage insurance. The important thing is to realize that everybody has different advantages and different disadvantages in their lives. So the best person to compare yourself is to you, and only focus on what you can afford and trying to live within your means and your circumstances and your situation. It's important when you think about that to not think about the advantages and the things that other people have, and not take into account that other people also have other struggles that you may not have. I know a lot of times when I talk about finances, people say, oh, well, you were in the military, so you get the VA loan. It's like, yeah, I also had to go to Afghanistan and receive mortar attacks in order to get that VA home loan. And so everybody had the opportunity in the mid 2010s to join the military. The Army was looking for a lot of people. Not all of us did. And that's okay. I don't hold it against other people, but don't act like some people just have advantages that don't have trade-offs as well. Sure, somebody else may have gotten an early inheritance from their parents because their parents died when they were young or something like that. You just never know what somebody's going through or what their challenges are. So it's not worth it. It doesn't benefit you at all to just make excuses for yourself by trying to play the victim and act like everybody else is more favored or advantaged than you are. So that's rule number one, is get rid of the victim mentality. Get rid of the mentality and ignore the content, the people out there that are telling you life is too expensive. You can't afford to have kids. You'll never be able to buy a home. You'll never be able to buy a car. Whatever it is, whatever your dream is, don't let people just flat out tell you that you're never going to be able to do it. If you accept that, then you don't deserve to ever get to what you want to have. Because if you're willing to just accept this idea that, oh, life is hard, things are expensive, interest rates are high, I'm never going to be able to work hard enough to succeed, then you're just never going to. And so you're just accepting defeat before the race has even really started. This is something I see far too often, especially on social media, where you just have people that are just defeated and discouraged and hopeless. And it's never a place that you want to be, especially as a person of faith. If you're somebody who believes in God and believes that God has a plan for your life, you never should just accept victimhood or just believing that things are impossible for you. Yes, it might be harder. Yes, it may be more difficult to achieve the American dream now than it was 50, 75 years ago, but that doesn't make it impossible. All right, so broadly speaking, let's talk about why budgeting matters, why taking an intentional approach to how you spend your money is important. It's because budgeting isn't just meant to restrict your freedom. The same thing as, not even talking about your budget month to month, but broadly speaking, when you think about how much are you going to spend on housing, if you're looking to buy a house, or you're thinking about how much am I going to spend on a car payment month to month compared to my take home pay. All of these things are important decisions, and they don't necessarily intuitively fall under the category of budgeting, but what they're actually meant to do is to give you a structure that allows you to operate with peace rather than with stress and anxiety about every financial decision you make. Spending money, as we all know, is very fun up front. There's different people out there. Most of us fall into one or two categories, either being a spender or being a saver. I'm somebody that I enjoy spending money. My wife enjoys it a little bit more than I do, but we both really enjoy spending money. I like to save a little bit more. I like to see the bank account pile up and see a lot of money within the bank account. Or I remember back when I was a kid and you get cash for your birthdays and things, like I'd love to hold $1,000 of cash when I was 15 years old and just see, wow, I've just been saving and saving and look how much money I have. I think it's really awesome. But I'm one that likes to save up and then spend a lot. And so it doesn't really work out in the long run if I don't have a plan and I'm not intentional about it. So yes, I like to save, but I like to save in order to spend. And so you have to kind of know where you're at. And are you a spender or are you a saver? Usually, one in a marriage, one spouse is a saver, one spouse is a spender, and then you start to have friction in the relationship because financial decisions get more and more difficult to make and they get more and more important over time. And so this budgeting or this mindset allows you to operate within your means, which is going to allow you to operate with peace in your heart. The Catechism of the Catholic Church says this in 2407. It says, in economic matters, respect for human dignity requires the practice of the virtue of temperance, moderation, and the will to live simply. And so I believe, I always joke that my wife and I like the finer things. We like nicer things. We just moved from Atchison, Kansas to Kansas City. And one of the reasons we gave to a lot of people who asked us, why are you moving out of Atchison? Atchison's perfect. We're not Atchison people. It's nothing against people who live in Atchison. There's people in Atchison who like nicer things too, but feel like the sacrifice of the nicer things, nicer restaurants, activities, the different things you can go do is worth it for the community and what they have there in Atchison. We didn't feel that way, and that's okay. People have different perspectives, different opinions, whatever. You're free to do what you want. That's the beautiful thing about life and about America. But at the same time, we have to be intentional with trying to live simply. And so as Christians, I believe we're all called to do that. And I think the best way to know that you're doing that is to live below your means. And a very clear, I think, sign of materialism where you're in a bad place in your relationship with money is when you're spending money you just absolutely do not have. And so to me, it's like a step or two down from having a gambling addiction. If you are out there just spending money, going into more and more debt to have a car that you really can't afford, to have a house that you really can't afford, to go on vacations that you can't afford. We kind of joke about the term shopaholics, but some people really are addicted to spending money and they just see money come in and money goes out. And they're living paycheck to paycheck, not just because cost of living is really high, but because they just have no budget, they have no temperance, they have no prudence in how they're using their money. It would be analogous to somebody who, kind of wines and dines, or maybe they're a caterer for their full-time job, or a bartender who's really an alcoholic, but drinks every night and just says, oh, well, it's just for camaraderie at the bar. That's kind of how a lot of people who are shopaholics or spending addicts treat the economy. They say, oh, well, it's just really expensive to live right now. And so, yeah, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. And it's like, no, dude, you're spending so much money. You're living paycheck to paycheck because you eat out all the time and you don't work that hard and you don't make that much money. And so you're struggling because you have no budget, you have no discipline. So sometimes just because it's economically difficult out there doesn't give you free reign to just spend and struggle because it's like expected that you're going to struggle. All right, so let's talk about two kind of extreme approaches when it comes to budgeting or making some of these big decisions like buying a house or buying a car. The first I want to talk about is kind of the Ramsey conservative. And I'm not talking conservative politically, even though Ramsey is politically conservative. I just mean conservative as in you're playing it very safe. And so he always says, never buy new, always pay cash, 15-year mortgage only, and live on beans and rice, right? That's kind of like some of his slogans and his phrases. So Dave Ramsey typically will say that if you're buying a house, it shouldn't be any more than 25% of your take-home pay. It should be on a 15-year fixed mortgage, and you should be putting 20% down on that house. And you should, never buy new, pay cashes for cars. But still, this is kind of some of the guidelines that he's giving. And so if you take a typical house, I think the median home price is somewhere in the 400,000s. Let me check real quick. Okay, yes. So the median home price in the U.S. right now, or in the second quarter of 2025, was $410,800. And so, yeah, 411. That's kind of incredible. This is one of my favorite things, is that we bought our house for basically 412 this year. And so we were very excited about that. 410, 412, right around that mark. And so it's pretty incredible to see, yeah, just how much you have to pay for just a median house in the United States of America. And so that's $410,000. So if you're putting 20% down on that, that's going to be 80K right there that you have to have in cash according to this rule. Now, possibly the harder part is doing a 15-year fixed mortgage on that amount. So let me estimate what that would be right now as well. Okay, so if you put the 20% down, which again is about $82,000, then your mortgage amount is going to be 328K, which is going to leave you with an approximate monthly payment of $2,700. So in order for that to be less than 25% of your take-home pay, you would have to be making or taking home $10,800 per month, which, gross would need to be somewhere around $13,000 a month, depending on where you live and how bad your taxes are. And that would be about 155K a year. And so think about that. That'd be for a median house, according to Ramsey's logic, the best you could do to buy a median house, just a regular house in the United States of America. We bought a 4-bedroom house. It's about 2,000 square feet finished. And this says that I would have to do 15-year fix. I'd have to have 82K to put down, and I'd have to spend or be making about 155K a year in order to have it be in that 25% of my take home pay. That would be the most conservative. The thing about Ramsey that I like to explain to people is that you can't go wrong following his plan. if you're able to do it, you're guaranteed to be very wealthy at the end of your life. If you do this and you're tithing 10% as he encourages, and you're giving 15%, or you're investing 15% of your income, and you're living on this little amount of your actual gross income, you're going to be balling, and your house is going to be paid off in 15 years. If I did this, my house would be paid off when I'm 47 years old, and then you just really ramp up your investing and all that kind of stuff. And so it's not bad advice because it would work. It's just very difficult to follow. And so that's kind of the challenge of following Ramsey today. It's not that it's bad. Some people think that it's dumb. It's not. It's foolproof. It's like undefeated. It's just really difficult. It's really challenging. And so this is where you have to start getting to, how risky am I willing to be? Because what I did, I just bought this house. Even though we had some proceeds, we just sold our house in Denver for a little bit over $715,000. And then we bought a house for, like I said, around $415,000. So $300,000 less in Kansas City to buy a nicer, larger house, which is just insane to think about, the fact that you're able to do that in certain places in America. If you're living in one of those top 10, top 20 most expensive markets, I just think that everybody, if you're building a family, if you're at this stage in life like I am, if you're in your 20s and your 30s, it's worth it to at least consider going somewhere that's more affordable. You don't have to do it. If you have family, your job, whatever it might be. I'm not saying that everybody should do it. I'm not saying it's a moral decision necessarily. In some cases it might be, but I think that's, the exception, not the rule. But it's worth considering, because I'm telling you, we've done it, and we're only a few months in, but we're loving life. It's been really, really awesome. And so let's talk about the other extreme. We see people on social media that say, whatever, just buy it now. You'll worry about it later. How do you afford the lifestyle? I remember one reel that was going viral a while back. It was like, how do you afford this lifestyle that you're living? You're traveling, doing all these things. It's just like, I can't. I'm in debt. I have credit cards and all these things. And more power to you if that's how you want to live your life. Certainly shouldn't do that. It's definitely immoral to do that if you have a family, in my opinion. But I still think that for most people, it's not a good decision. Being house poor or car broke is not fun. When you're in debt and you're just constantly being swamped in credit card bills and car payments and house payments, all these things, and you can't afford to do anything. You have no savings. You're living paycheck to paycheck. You have to stay at a job that you hate because you can't afford to take a few months off to look for a new job or to leave. That is not fun. It's not an enviable situation to be in. So you also don't want to do that. And so before we transition into thinking about buying a car, thinking about buying a house, I want to remind you of this important biblical principle that comes to us from Luke 14, verse 28. Jesus says, which of you wishing to build a tower does not first sit down and count the cost? And he gives this example of somebody who doesn't count the cost and see if he has enough money to finish a building project. And he talks about how you would mock this person, that if somebody got halfway done with the tower and ran out of money, like, that's clearly a foolish person. But we do this all the time. We don't take into account how much money we currently have and projecting out into the future how much money we're going to have. And so that can be in the form of thinking about, well, if my wife she's not, but if she was 6 months pregnant right now, I have to be thinking for 2026, I'm going to be having a baby. There's going to be new costs that I'm going to incur from the birth of that baby, healthcare costs, to maybe we need more clothes, diapers, food, all these different things. So expecting your expenses to go up and your income's going to go up. And so trying to get your income to go up faster than your expenses is obviously important, especially if you're a provider and a family. But then you also have to be simultaneously decreasing your wants. If you can decrease your wants and increase your ability to have things, you're almost guaranteed to be happy. You're guaranteed to have the peace that so many of us are desperate for and searching for in our lives. And so that's obviously a clear step one. If you're sitting down as a family or as an individual and you're wanting to buy a car, first thing you got to think about is how much money do I have? If you have no money and you have a car that is not worth anything for a trade in, you probably shouldn't even be thinking about buying a car. Or if you are, it's obviously needs to be a used car that you're just going to kind of get by with. When I bought a car, my first car that I bought as an adult, I guess really ever, I never bought a car as a teenager or anything like that. I just went with family members when they were buying cars, which was not a great example for me for the most part. But when I went to buy my first car, I had a Dodge Dart that was about 7 years old. I got a few $1,000s for the trade in, but I had saved up a lot of cash over the last several years of just living single and all those sorts of things. And so I go in and I bought a Toyota Camry. Now I did buy a new car. I've only bought two cars now, and I've bought new both times. And I know there's the wisdom that says never buy a new car, and I get it. And I think that going used is probably the right way to go. But it also depends. It depends what kind of car you're getting, what kind of value it's going to hold. And so because I bought two cars now that both hold their value pretty well, I did end up going with a new car. In the case of the Camry, I paid it off within a year. I bought a 2020 Camry in 2020, and I paid it off within the first year of owning it. And now still in 2025, I have it in great shape. It's like the not the fanciest Camry, but it has like leather seats, it's a little bit nicer. I don't even have 30,000 miles on it yet. And so the trade-in value on this thing is insane. I bought it for, I don't know, $22,000, $23,000 probably because of the trade-in. So I think it was like a $27,000, $28,000 car at the time. It was before kind of this huge inflation of cars. And it's like the trade-in value right now is like 15K or something like that. And so when people say never buy new, I'm like, it kind of depends, right? On how much you're able to maintain it. Because if I had bought a car with 60,000 miles on it, now it had 90,000 miles on it, and it was a 2017, what's it worth today in 2025? Nothing, basically. But now I have a 30,000 mile 2020, it's still worth something. And so it's still a little bit valuable, and it actually has some good cash value attached to it. So I think it depends on what your plan is. If you plan to keep it forever, if you plan to keep it for a little bit. If I was only going to keep it for 2 or 3 years, then yeah, it makes sense maybe to buy a used car if I'm not driving a lot. There's a lot of factors that go into it. First factor you need to think about is how much money do I have? What is my current monthly budget? How much monthly payment can I actually afford? Am I willing to give up? How much am I willing to allow this car payment to eat out of my monthly budget that I currently have? Because this money should typically be coming not from your needs, but from your wants. And so if you're living with an extra 500, extra 1,000, extra $2,000 a month that you're currently spending or saving, then that allows you to say, okay, I'm willing to put $300, $400, $500 of that towards a car payment for the next 5 years. And you have to think about that. Like the car loans, if you're not paying them off early, 5 years is a long time. And so you're committing to this for the long haul. So this is not a small decision. And it's a decision that you need to take seriously and really be thinking about. And so Ramsey's baseline, if you're thinking about that kind of extreme, he says a car payment should be less than 15% of your take-home pay, preferably none. It shouldn't be any of your take-home pay because you should be buying a used car with cash if possible. Now, what I think is kind of the more modern, practical approach to this is just accepting the fact that you're going to probably have to do some financing. And so we did take out a loan on this car. We just bought this Kia Carnival. It was around $40,000. We had saved up some money. We just sold our house. And so we walked away from our house with about $50,000 from our last home sale. And so we had about 50K that had come back to us. Now we invested a lot into our house. I've never done a full video on this, but we bought our house for $650,000. We put $2,000 down or something like that when we bought it. And we Airbnb'd it for the first 2.5-ish years that we lived there, 2 years that we lived there. And we put a lot of money into it in order to do that. And so it was an interesting balance and kind of looking at that trade-off of Airbnb, kind of flipping the house a little bit in order to Airbnb because we had to renovate it, and then selling the house and walking away with a profit. Now we did invest about 30K into it. We made about 50K overall from the Airbnb. And so ended up being a pretty solid investment, allowing us to kind of break even on what we were already paying for our rent in a 2-bedroom apartment, and then walking away with cash, which we obviously wouldn't have been able to do in a 2-bedroom apartment. We would have been able to save some money, but we wouldn't have had the yard to play with our kids and the dog and all these kinds of things. And so to me, it was a great decision, but there's a lot that went into that, and that could be a whole video in and of itself. But I think just here, for us with this car. So we had some cash sitting aside, and so I put about half down on the car. And so I was like, I'm not financing more than $20,000. And so I went in there with what cash I had. Obviously, I didn't want to buy the whole car cash because I wanted some of this cash for furniture and other things with the house. And we were able to save money over a few months living with my in-laws in between houses. And so we were very lucky and very blessed to have that opportunity. And then I was speaking and coaching and doing the things that I was doing also to be earning extra income on the side of my job, which is in sales. And so all of that is very helpful, and it's not something that I just necessarily lucked my way into. A lot of those things have taken years and been developing over time with a lot of hard work and effort. And so buying this car, we finance it and we're like, okay, this is what I want our monthly payment to be. We were able to get our monthly payment to be just shy of $400 per month. And I said, all right, that sounds good to me. That's going to be a good deal. And so we didn't go with the Chevy Suburban that we would have liked to have had, or the top of the line Toyota Sienna, which is a little bit more expensive. Instead, we went with the Kia Carnival. We love it. We didn't get the nicest one, but we did get a nice one. I mean, we really like it. It's not there's like 5 trim levels of it. I think we're the second or the third. And so it's not like a crazy fancy car by any means, but it's new. Part of the reason why we bought it new, again, similar to my Camry discussion, was just thinking about, well, if we own it for about 5 years, let's say we put 10 to 15,000 miles on it a year, is it better to own a 2020 in 2030? Will I rather have, or how much cash value would a 2022 Kia Carnival that would be 8 years old, that maybe has anywhere from 110 to 140,000 miles on it? How much is that going to be worth compared to a 2025 or 2026 one in 2030? So, calendar wise, it's only 4 years old from the model, 4 years old, that'll have 50 to 75,000 miles on it. How much would that be worth? And so when you start to think about these things, you start to get different trade-offs. And if you like the newer version enough, then I think it's worth it if you have the money to go ahead and do that. The worst thing you can do is go ahead and spend a lot of money on a car that you absolutely can't afford. An example that I give sometimes when talking about this, I remember a couple years ago talking with a friend, and this was a Catholic person, a Catholic woman, and she was talking about how two separate conversations, but both within the same week. She's telling me about how she and her husband just did their taxes, and she realized at the end of the year, filing her taxes, that they hadn't been very generous throughout that year. Now, people can make their own tithing decisions. This isn't a video about tithing, about generosity and giving, but I'm a huge proponent of it. I don't think that it's like a mortal sin to not give 10%. We're not always great about giving 10%. I think to give 0% is sinful. It is immoral. It is greedy. It is very problematic. I think that especially as Catholics, we're called and obligated to support our priests, to support our local parish that we're a part of, to support the diocese in some capacity. I don't think you need to give 10 grand to the diocese, but giving some to like the bishop's annual Catholic appeal, those sorts of things I think are really important. I love Tony Robbins' phrase, if you won't give a dime out of a dollar, you won't give a million out of 10 million. What I can tell you as somebody who's seen my income from 5 years ago substantially go up, when I was working as a resident director for 30K a year, I can tell you that it is 100% true. When I was making 30K, it was hard to give 3 grand. And then when I made 100K for the first time, it was hard to give $10,000 because you look at your taxes at the end of the year and you're like, I gave away $5, $7, $10,000. It's like, it's mind blowing. It seems like I can't believe I could have 10,000 more dollars right now if I just wasn't giving. It's challenging, man, because the number just goes up. And yes, you have more, but you're still looking at that price a lot of times with that same training and mindset and framework that you've always had. If you're somebody who your parent, I had a parent that was making at certain points in my childhood 40K, 50K a year, 60K a year. And so to think about the fact that I'm giving away now $10,000 in a year, it's like insane. And so that's challenging. Just before this, we've had some interesting times with moving and our tithe getting messed up because we weren't at a parish. And I gave a couple $1,000s to our annual Catholic appeal here to our new diocese in Kansas City, St. Joseph. And that's hard to do when you have credit card bills. I'm looking at the furniture, all this stuff we bought. We bought a new dresser. We bought a new dresser for our son. We bought a new dining room table. We bought a new couch. And it's like, man, to give away that much money, even when you have money coming from a home sale, speaking, all these things, it's hard. And so don't think if you're out there, that you're going to just be generous someday when you have a lot of money, because it's not how it works. Tony Robbins is spot on with that. So going back to the story, she says, yeah, we only gave away a few $100s last year. And I said, oh, okay. Just encouraging her, like, wasn't a judgmental moment. I was just like, that happens. The crazy thing for me was actually later in that week when we were talking about cars. And she was like, yeah, my husband has a new pickup truck that we just bought a couple years ago. And he was just talking about how he wants to buy a Ford Bronco and trade it in for a Ford Bronco. And she's like, no, you can't do that. You just bought your truck. And I'm like, wait a minute. My man's talking about buying a Ford Bronco when he gave $300 or $50 or whatever it was, the number, last year in his tithing. And now he's buying. That's where you start to get yourself into trouble. Where you start to get yourself into trouble is I'm driving a new car, I'm driving a new pickup truck, but I only tithe 0.5%. I'm driving a new pickup truck. As a husband and father, I've got a really nice new car, but my wife, who's driving the kids around, she's driving a little beater. So one of my things for my life, I've had this bumper issue on my Camry, my beloved Camry that I bought, as I said, 5 years ago. I got clipped at an airport parking lot a long time ago, 4 years ago, basically, in Denver. And it's about $500 to $1,000 to fix it, because you got to order a new bumper, you got to get it painted, and you got to get it put on. I've tried a few times and had no luck in Denver with Toyota getting it ordered. But I also just didn't even try for 3 years, because it was almost like this point of pride to me, and like this humbling point to drive a Camry and have it be kind of messed up. Even though I loved it, I worked really hard to pay it off. I cherished the car. I try to take good care of it otherwise. But it was kind of this humbling thing. The fact that, especially as a husband and father, to be able to go out and buy my wife and my kids a new car before I fix my own. To me, that was just a very important point for me to be able to do those things, to be able to say, you guys come first. This is more important. And I think that's an important thing for husbands and fathers to do. And I've seen it a lot of times where that's not the case. That's not what happens. And so it's okay if your wife has a serviceable car and it's what makes sense for your family. I'm not saying that's always bad, but I've seen some situations and circumstances where the husband's driving some pretty nice car and the wife is driving a beater with the kids and all these kinds of things. And I just think that's odd. It's odd to me that you would make your family car trash while dad's car is nice and impressive. So when you're thinking about this, you sit down, you're like, this is how much cash we have. This is how much expendable income we have. Then you start to think about what percentage of my budget, this is the same mindset, the same thing you're going to do with housing. What percentage of this am I willing to give? How much do I anticipate is my goal for my income to go up over the years? Because you want to make it, the best way to go about doing these things is you make these percentage goals and you do it for your current amount of money that you're making. And so when I was looking at our housing, when we were moving from Denver to Kansas City, now I'm like, okay, we're living in a place where we can really play this financial game. But it's important to me that we live below our means, because that's the whole goal, is to save money. We could have moved here and we bought, like I said, a $650,000 house in Denver. Now we were only able to afford that because of Airbnb being the home, the VA loan, all those things. We could have moved here and bought a house for $500, $550 to $600. Still would have been cheaper than our house in Denver that we just sold for $715. But we could have, for $200K less, we could have bought almost, $150K less. We could have bought almost our dream home here in Kansas City. I mean, when you get into that 5 to 6 range in KC, you're talking about some nice freaking houses. But then you have all those hidden costs. What if something goes wrong with the foundation? What if a huge appliance goes out? HVAC gets more expensive. Your utilities get more expensive in a big house. All the furniture you have to buy to fill that big house, all of those things come into effect, and they start to impact your lifestyle, your decisions, your peace, if you're not careful. So what I decided to try to do, as I said before too, I have income that comes multiple different ways. I have several different streams of income that I've developed. And I was like, let's just try to live on my base salary. And if we can do within 25%-ish of my base salary, we'll just have abundant peace, right? If we can just live where 25% of my base salary is our housing, in that 25 to 30%, which people typically say, outside of Ramsey, that's a good number to aim for, then it's like, if we can keep our payment within 25% of my base salary, then this car payment, all these other things is going to be much, much easier to handle. Much easier to handle. And so that's what we started to shoot for. And we love our house. We're obsessed with this new house, absolutely love it. But I think we bought the house for probably half of what we were approved for. And so, yes, we could have been house poor. We could have lived in a mansion, could have started maxing out credit cards and started going backwards and living at or exceeding our means and just each year spending more and more and more. But that's not the goal. It's not the point. We're already loving our house. We already got a massive upgrade. Do we need to have every single thing that we want? Or is it enough to just have our needs and a lot of our wants fulfilled in this house? To live in a house that, yeah, we bought a house with an unfinished basement. And so like we're excited to have that finished, but it's gonna cost money, it's gonna cost time, it's gonna require sacrifice. And because we're doing it, we're gonna experience some of that like live in flip experience. So we get to put the money into it. And then when we sell the house, we bought a house for 2,000 square feet with 4 bedrooms, and we'll be selling and what, 3 baths, and we'll be 2.5 baths. We'll be selling a house with 5 bedrooms, 3,000 square feet, and 3.5 baths because we wanted to try to find something like that. We weren't going to Airbnb again, but we were like, I'd love to do a live and flip of some sort because I'm willing to sacrifice. I'm willing to take on that project. I'm willing to find the contractors, manage it all, do all those things, live in a construction zone, all of that for the sake of having this financial gain down the line. And so thinking about your life 5, 10 years from now, not just 5, 10 months from now, most people are making these decisions thinking 5, 10 minutes from now when you get to drive off the lot or you get to walk into the house or you get to live in that place that seems really cool because Denver's awesome and LA's cool and Seattle would be fun and Washington, D.C. is really popular and awesome and hip. It's not fun when you're poor. It's just simply not. Like living in the mountains is not cool if all you can afford to do is drive there and sleep on the ground. People like to go skiing, you like to do some of the activities. Golfing was my favorite thing to do in Denver. It was also hella expensive. And so I moved to Atchison, Kansas, where I was paying legitimately $17 to go play 9 holes with a golf cart. And so I got to play a lot more, which was a lot more fun. And so when you think about these things, you want to have these experiences. You want to be thinking about trying to set yourself up for the most success, not just now, but in the future. And so planning now, since I've been working in sales, I've seen 15 to 25% increase in income year over year, just increasing sales, renewals, all these different things that you're able to be a part of, recurring sales, whatever it is. When you find that you're able to do that and you're able to grow your income, it's a great thing. But if you can plan right now for, say, okay, 5 years from now, I hope to increase my income by 25%. Well, great. Well, let's make the decision on where we're going to live for the next 5 years based on what I'm making now. That seems like the safest bet, and we'll be locked into having a life of peace. And then we start to be able to rack up our savings. We actually have an emergency fund, a loss of income fund. We're actually funding our kids' college education or whatever it might be for you and your family, but you're actually thinking about things in this strategic long-term route. And it's hard, guys. This isn't something that a lot of people naturally think about. It's not something that they naturally go towards. And it's the same thing with giving. It's such an easy thing to forget about. So I don't want to shame you into that, but take a look at your income and see how much you're giving. Almost every time this year, we're going to probably give more than we ever have before. But every time I look at how much we've given so far this year, I'm like, I'm shocked at where I think it is. If you had me guess before I pulled up Monarch, which is what we use as our budgeting tool, which I'll include a link to a free trial for that because I love Monarch. I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that, but I just think it's a great app. But there's many great apps out there. Every Dollar by Dave Ramsey, I think, is free and is a great budgeting tool as well. But every time I get on there, man, I'm like, I think we're giving more than we are. I see that we're not, and I'm like, dang, we're kind of behind. And I think that's the natural thing. You almost never are giving more than you think you are because nobody's really that generous. And so some people might be, but for the most part, we're going to be shocked if you go deep into your finances and you see how much you're actually giving. And so I wanted to just let you know, if you'd like to set up a one-time session, a 90-day, kind of coaching program that I have, where we can go through the full Excellent Life program, go to seekingexcellence.us and check out the options that we have there. We have a one-time session, we have a 90-day intensive, and then I have this full Excellent Life program where we talk about being intentional, taking responsibility, and creating a plan for your life in the most important areas of your life, like your relationships, your spiritual life, your fitness and health, and of course, your personal finances. And so sometimes getting money out there, just talking about it with somebody, opening up, being vulnerable, it's so life-giving. It's so freeing to just not be a slave to it, not just keep everything in the dark. And so if you'd like to chat about that, you can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on Instagram, and you can also join us on Locals at seekingexcellence.locals.com for more exclusive content that will help you in this journey of excellence for your life. And so go out there, make some prudent and good decisions, pray about the things you're going to do, take stock of what you have, what you want your life to look like, and Just believe me when I tell you, choose optimism, choose hope, most importantly. Choose hope that your future can be better than your current situation. Because if you don't have hope, nothing's going to change and nothing will improve. I promise you that. All right. God bless you. Thanks for listening today. It's now time for you to go out there and be your best. I'll see you next time.